Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku trained alone before UHL. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not built for men, it was built for gods. And Izuku Midoriya had learned, with the crushing weight of 14 years of evidence, that he was merely a mortal lost in the land of titans. The tunnel was damp. It smelled of sewage, old rainwater, and the metallic tang of fear. The sensation of the sludge forcing its way down his throat was less like drowning and more like being erased. It was a violation of his existence, a fluid suffocation that filled his nose, his mouth, his lungs. He clawed at the green viscosity, his fingernails finding no purchase, his vision spotting with panic-induced static. I'm dying, he thought. The thought wasn't profound. It was clinical. I am going to die here, in a tunnel, and no one will know. Texas. Smash! The world inverted. The pressure vanished, replaced by a wind pressure so intense it felt like being hit by a semi-truck made of air. The sludge scattered, painting the concrete walls in a violent mural of green. Izuku hit the ground hard, gasping, his lungs burning as they remembered how to process oxygen. He looked up, tears streaming from eyes that stung with grime. There he stood. The Titan. The Golden Age personified. All Might. He was larger than life, a towering mountain of muscle and primary colors, his smile blinding even in the dim underpass. He was bottling the villain, the thing that had nearly ended Izuku's life seconds ago, into plastic soda bottles with a speed that defied physics. Are you alright, young man? The voice boomed, rattling Izuku's ribcage. Izuku scrambled backward, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his sternum. All Might! You saved me! Ha ha ha! I apologize for getting you caught up in my justice ing. All Might stood tall, wiping a smudge of slime from his bicep. But fear not, for I am here. And the villain is contained. Izuku's mind raced. The shock was giving way to the frantic, obsessive adoration that defined his entire life. All Might. The symbol of peace. He's real. He's right here. Izuku scrambled for his backpack, his hands shaking violently as he retrieved his notebook. Please! Sign my. He opened the book to see the signature already there. A massive scrawl across 2 pages. Izuku stared at it, his breath hitching. Now, I must be off. Evil doesn't wait, and time is of the essence. All Might crouched, the concrete beneath his boots cracking under the potential energy. Wait! Izuku stepped forward. The question. The question that had been burning a hole in his soul since the doctor told him he had an extra toe joint. The question that kept him awake at 3 a.m. while he stared at the ceiling. Can I be a hero without a quirk? He opened his mouth. Stay safe, citizen. Boom. The shockwave knocked Izuku back onto his rear. Dust swirled. By the time Izuku shielded his eyes and looked up, the sky was empty. A distant twinkle marked the hero's trajectory. All Might was gone. Izuku sat on the cold concrete of the underpass. His hand was still outstretched, reaching for a cape that was miles away. The silence of the tunnel rushed back in, deafening and heavy. He hadn't asked? He had been too slow. Too weak. Too hesitant. Of course, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. Why would he wait for me? He stood up, his legs trembling. He dusted off his gakurin, the black fabric stained with sewer water. He looked at the notebook in his hand. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The signature stared back at him. It felt less like a gift and more like a consolation prize. A participation trophy for surviving. He closed the book. He didn't feel happy. He felt a profound, hollow ache in the center of his chest. The sound of explosions drew him in like a moth to a flame. It was a physiological defect, he decided. Even after nearly dying, even after being reminded of his insignificance, his feet moved toward danger on their own. Tatooine Station was a chaotic mess of fire and screaming civilians. The heat was palpable from 2 blocks away, a physical wall that pressed against the skin. Police tape cordoned off the intersection, holding back a thrashing sea of onlookers. Izuku squeezed through the gaps in the crowd, making himself small. It was the only thing he was truly good at, being unnoticed. It's a monster! Someone screamed. Where are the heroes? There's a kid in there! Izuku reached the front of the barricade and froze. The alleyway was an inferno. The fires licked up the sides of the buildings, shattering windows. And in the center of the blaze, a familiar nightmare held court. The sludge villain. It escaped? Izuku's blood ran cold. Did I knock the bottles loose when I grabbed All Might? No. All Might jumped away. Did they fall out of his pocket? Guilt, sharp and acidic, flooded his stomach. This was his fault. If he hadn't distracted All Might, if he hadn't been so weak as to get caught in the first place, why aren't they doing anything? A woman next to him cried out. Izuku looked at the heroes. They were paralyzed. Death Arms, the heavy hitter, was standing back, shielding his face from the heat. There's no room to engage. I can't get a grip on that fluid. Kamui Woods was useless amidst the flames. I have to prioritize rescue and fire control. Empty Lady was stuck outside the street, too large to enter without crushing the civilians she was meant to save. Excuses? They were shouting excuses. Then, the smoke cleared for a fraction of a second, and Izuku saw him, caught in the suffocating embrace of the sludge, thrashing violently, explosions popping from his palms in futile bursts of nitroglycerin. Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki's eyes met Izuku's. Time seemed to dilate. The roar of the fire faded into a low, muffled drone. Izuku saw the terror in those crimson eyes. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo wasn't looking at him with arrogance, or hatred, or condescension. He was looking at Izuku with the raw, primal desperation of a dying animal. Help me! Izuku's muscles tensed. His brain screamed the command, go. Move. Run. But his feet were nailed to the pavement. What can I do? The thought was a glacial spike through his heart. I have no quirk. I am useless. Death Arms can't do it. Kamui Woods can't do it. If I go in there, I'll just be another hostage. I'll just get in the way. I'll make it worse. He watched the sludge force its way into Katsuki's mouth. He watched the light in Katsuki's eyes dim, panic turning into the glazing stillness of unconsciousness. Izuku took a step. But it was a step back. The cowardice tasted like bile. He trembled, his hands clutching the straps of his yellow backpack so hard his knuckles turned white. He was watching his childhood friend die, and he was doing math. He was calculating the odds of survival instead of moving. Detroit. Smash! The wind returned. The air pressure dropped so sharply Izuku's ears popped. A tornadic blast of air ripped through the alleyway, extinguishing the fires in a single, violent gust and scattering the sludge villain into harmless droplets of rain. All Might stood there. Steam rose from his body. He was panting, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but he stood victorious. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Applause. The chant of his name. All Might! All Might! All Might! The heroes rushed in to collect the unconscious Bakugo and secure the sludge remains. The reporters swarmed. The narrative was secured. The day was saved. Izuku stood in the silence of his own mind. He watched the paramedics check Bakugo. He saw the pro-heroes, Death Arms and Kamui Woods, praising Bakugo for his bravery, for his strong quirk, for enduring so long. You're going to be a hell of a sidekick one day, kid! Death Arms slapped Bakugo's back. No one looked at Izuku. Why would they? He hadn't done anything. He was just a face in the crowd. A spectator. He turned around. The cheers sounded distinctively like mocking laughter now. He pushed his way back through the crowd, head down, eyes fixed on his red sneakers. I didn't move. The realization was heavier than the sky. I wanted to be a hero. I told myself that the only thing stopping me was a quirk. But that's a lie, isn't it? He walked. He didn't take the train. He needed the punishment of the long walk home. Heroes move before they think. That's what they say. But I thought. I thought about safety. I thought about logic. I froze. He clenched his teeth so hard his jaw ached. I'm not a hero. I'm just a fanboy watching from the sidelines. The apartment was quiet when he entered. Izuku? Inko Midoriya came around the corner from the kitchen. She looked frantic, her eyes red-rimmed. She must have seen the news. Oh, thank goodness. I saw the fire near the station, and I tried to call, but you didn't answer, and I was so worried. She rushed forward, wrapping him in a hug. She smelled of dinner and anxiety. Izuku stood limp in her arms. He felt like a ghost haunting his own body. I'm okay, Mom, he said. His voice sounded mechanical. I watched. Inko pulled back, cupping his face. Her eyes searched his. She saw the hollowness there, and her expression crumbled into that familiar, pitying sadness that Izuku had come to despise. Oh, Izuku, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Stop, Izuku thought. Don't apologize. I'm sorry you have to see things like that, she continued, misunderstanding his pain. I'm sorry it's so hard for you. Stop it. I'll make katsudon, she said, trying to smile through her watery eyes. Your favorite. It'll make you feel better. Izuku gently removed her hands from his face. I'm not hungry, Mom. I'm going to my room. Izuku? I'm tired, he said, turning away. Just tired. He closed his bedroom door and locked it. The room greeted him with 1,000 smiling faces. All Might posters covered the wallpaper. All Might figurines lined the shelves. All Might bedsheets. All Might clock. It was a shrine to a god who had saved him, signed his book, and then left him to realize his own worthlessness. Izuku dropped his backpack on the floor. He sat at his desk. He pulled out Hero Analysis number 13. He opened it to the autograph. For 10 years, he had told himself that if he just studied hard enough, if he analyzed enough quirks, if he wanted it badly enough, the universe would grant him a path. He believed that heart mattered more than hardware. Today, the universe had answered. Heart didn't stop sludge. Heart didn't put out fires. Heart didn't save Katsuki. Power did. Action did, and Izuku had neither. He looked at the poster above his desk, All Might in his Silver Age costume, pointing at the camera. You can be a hero. The caption didn't say, but implied. Liar, Izuku whispered. A sudden surge of rage, hot and white, erupted in his chest. It wasn't the explosive anger of Bakugo. It was the pressurized, hysterical anger of a dam breaking. He grabbed the notebook. With a guttural scream, he tore the page out. The sound of ripping paper was violent in the quiet room. He crumpled the autograph, the paper crinkling into a tight ball, and threw it at the trash can. He didn't stop there. He stood up and ripped the poster off the wall. The tape gave way with a sharp sip. He tore it in half. He grabbed the figurines, sweeping them off the shelf with a crash of plastic against wood. He stripped the sheets off his bed. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unceasing, but he wasn't sobbing. He was dismantling his life. He piled it all in the center of the room. The merch. The limited editions. The years of allowance money spent on a dream that was dead on arrival. And then, the other notebooks. Hero Analysis number 1 through 12. He picked up number 1. The drawings were crude, done in crayon when he was 5. He flipped through it. Kamui Woods, good at binding. Empty Lady, good for crowd control. Useless trivia. None of it had helped him move his feet. He threw the notebook onto the pile. I'm sorry, Izuku, he mimicked his mother's voice, a cruel whisper to himself. I'm sorry you're broken. I'm sorry you're defected. He sank to his knees in front of the pile of debris. He felt stripped raw. The hope was gone, and in its place was a terrifying, gaping void. He sat there for hours. The sun went down. The room darkened. The streetlights outside cast long, twisted shadows across the floor. He stared at the pile. If I can't be a hero, he murmured to the darkness, then what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? There was no answer. Just the humming of his computer tower in the corner. School the next few days was a blur of gray static. Katsuki was quiet. The incident had rattled him. He didn't scream, didn't pop explosions in the hallways. He walked with his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. When their eyes met, Katsuki didn't sneer. He looked away. It made Izuku feel sick. Katsuki Bakugo, the symbol of victory in Izuku's small world, had been broken. And Izuku had watched it happen. The teachers droned on. Career aptitude tests were handed out. Midoriya, the teacher said, handing him a sheet. Have you considered technical schools? You have good grades in analysis. Izuku took the paper. He didn't look at the hero course box. He didn't look at anything. He just put it in his bag. He went home. He didn't watch the news. He didn't watch hero fights on his phone. He sat at his computer in the dark, the blue light of the monitor illuminating his exhausted face. His room was bare now. The walls were empty, leaving lighter squares on the wallpaper where the posters used to be. The figurines were boxed up in the closet. He opened a search engine. The cursor blinked. Jobs for quirkless people, police force requirements, paramedic certification age. He scrolled. It was depressing. Desk jobs. Support roles. Nothing that involved saving people directly. Nothing that would stop that feeling of helplessness from happening again. He clicked a link on a deep dive forum. A thread about vigilantism laws. That led to a thread about underground heroics. Izuku paused. Underground heroes. He knew of them vaguely. They were the ones who didn't do interviews. They didn't sell merchandise. They weren't in the top 10 rankings because the rankings were based on popularity and solved cases. And underground heroes kept their cases out of the press. He clicked a video link titled, Rare Footage, Eraserhead vs. Mutant Gang. The video was low quality, likely taken from a security camera or a bystander's shaking phone in an alleyway at night. It was grainy and dark. 3 villains. They were huge, mutation quirks. One had blades coming out of his arms, another had stone skin. They were cornering a man dressed in black. The man looked homeless. Messy black hair, a gray scarf, baggy clothes. He's dead, Izuku muttered. He's outnumbered and small. The stone-skinned villain charged. The man in black didn't power up. He didn't shout a move name. His eyes flashed red for a microsecond. The camera barely caught it, and the villain's stone skin reverted to flesh. But that wasn't what caught Izuku's attention. It was the movement. The man ducked under a haymaker hook, wrapped a cloth binding around the villain's arm, and used the villain's own momentum to slam him face first into the concrete. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was physics applied with surgical precision. The second villain attacked. The man didn't use his quirk this time. He just dodged. He moved like water. He struck the villain in the throat, then swept his legs. He pulled a knife, a tactical combat knife, and cut a belt, dropping the villain's pants to trip him. It was dirty. It was unglamorous. Izuku leaned closer to the screen. The fight lasted 40 seconds. 3 powerful villains lay groaning on the ground. The man, Eraserhead, stood over them. He checked his watch, looked up at the rooftops, and fired a capture weapon to swing away into the shadows. Izuku replayed the video. He watched it again, and again. On the 10th viewing, Izuku realized something that made his breath hitch. He fights quirkless. Eraserhead had a quirk, Erasure. It leveled the playing field. It turned monsters back into men. But once they were men, Eraserhead beat them with his hands. With his scarf. With leverage and gravity and pain. If Eraserhead fought a villain whose quirk wasn't erasable, like a mutant type whose strength was physical rather than emitted, he still won. Izuku paused the video on a frame where Eraserhead was midair, knee driving into a villain's solar plexus. He doesn't rely on power, Izuku whispered. He relies on technique. Izuku looked at his own hands. They were soft. Uncalloused. The hands of a boy who held pencils and controllers. He looked back at the screen. All Might was a god. You couldn't imitate a god. You could only worship one. But Eraserhead? Eraserhead was a man. A man who had turned himself into a weapon. Izuku opened a new tab. Krav Maga Basics. Judo throws for smaller opponents. Anatomy. Weak points of the human body. Urban parkour tutorials. The cursor blinked. A thought, dangerous and seductive, began to take root in the wasteland of his mind. The entrance exam for UA is in 10 months. The logical part of his brain, the part that had frozen in the alleyway, scoffed. You can't. You have no quirk. You'll die. But another voice spoke up. A voice that sounded like tearing paper and grinding teeth. I am already dead. The boy who waited for a miracle died in that tunnel. Izuku stood up. He walked to the window. The city lights of Muzidafa twinkled below. Somewhere out there, heroes were posing for cameras. Somewhere out there, villains were plotting. And somewhere out there, people were afraid, looking for a savior who might be too busy signing autographs to notice them. Izuku went to his closet. He dug past the boxes of All Might figures until he found an old pair of gardening gloves and a gray hoodie. He looked at the clock. 3:45 a.m. "Mom's asleep," he whispered. He pulled the hoodie on. It swallowed his thin frame. He didn't open a notebook. He didn't write down a plan. Analysis was paralysis. He had spent his whole life planning for a future that required a quirk. No more planning. Just doing. He climbed out the window, sliding down the drainpipe with a clumsiness that nearly twisted his ankle. He hit the ground and started running. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard of consumption. It was a stretch of coastline that had been abandoned by the city, becoming an illegal dumping ground for decades. Mountains of trash obscured the horizon. Tires, refrigerators, broken cars, driftwood, plastic bags. It was a monument to human waste. The smell was atrocious. A mix of rotting seaweed, rust, and garbage juice. Izuku stood at the top of the concrete stairs, looking down at the beach. The sun was just beginning to bruise the eastern horizon with purple and orange. It was quiet here. No fans. No heroes. Just the sound of waves crashing against junk. Izuku walked down the stairs. The sand was barely visible beneath the refuse. He stopped in front of a large, rusted truck tire. It was half buried in the sand, filled with brackish water and sludge. He stared at it. All Might isn't coming, he told himself. He's not going to pop out and offer me a quirk. He's not going to give me a meal plan. He reached out and grabbed the rim of the tire. The rubber was cold and slimy. He pulled. It didn't move. It was heavy, stuck in the wet sand, weighed down by the water inside. Izuku gritted his teeth. He planted his feet. He remembered the video of Eraserhead. Leverage. Center of gravity. He squatted lower. He didn't pull with his arms. He drove with his legs. Move, he grunted. The tire shifted an inch. The suction of the mud squelched. Move, he screamed it this time. The sound tore from his throat, raw and ugly. It was the scream of the boy in the tunnel who couldn't breathe. It was the scream of the boy watching his friend die. It was the scream of the boy who had been told "I'm sorry" instead of "you can do it." Move! He threw his entire body weight backward. With a wet schluck, the tire broke free from the sand. It flipped over, splashing stagnant water onto Izuku's shoes. He fell onto his back, gasping for air. His fingers hurt. His back hurt. He was dirty, wet, and smelling of garbage. He lay there, looking up at the lightning sky. He had moved a tire. One tire. There were millions of pounds of trash on this beach. It was impossible. Izuku sat up. He looked at the tire. Then he looked at the rusted refrigerator a few feet away. 10 months. He stood up. He wiped his hands on his pants. He wasn't trying to clean the beach to be a good citizen. He wasn't doing it for community service. He was going to turn this beach into a forge. And he was the raw iron. He walked over to the refrigerator. It was massive, a 2-door industrial unit. He placed his hands against the rusted metal. "I'm not a hero," Izuku whispered to the seagulls circling overhead. He dug his heels into the sand. "I'm just a guy who refuses to freeze again." He pushed. The metal groaned. The routine established itself with the brutality of a car crash. Izuku stopped sleeping through the night. He slept in 2 blocks, 4 hours after school, 3 hours before dawn. The rest of the time was spent in motion. He stopped taking notes on quirks. He started taking notes on physiology. He raided the school library for books on kinesiology, nutrition, and martial arts. He learned about hypertrophy, about lactic acid thresholds, about caloric surplus. He ate. He ate until he felt sick. Boiled chicken. Rice. Broccoli. Eggs. Cheap protein powder that tasted like chalk. He needed mass. He was a stick, and sticks snapped under pressure. He needed to be a log, then a stone. Then steel. Every morning, from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., he was at Dagoba Beach. The first week was hell. He threw up twice. He pulled a muscle in his back that made sitting in class agony. His hands blistered, popped, bled, and blistered again. But the trash moved. Slowly. Agonizingly slowly, he created zones. Zone A was tires. Zone B was appliances. Zone C was scrap metal. He didn't just lift. He fought the trash. He treated a standing wardrobe like an opponent. He practiced the judo throws he watched on YouTube against a mannequin he made out of duct tape and pillows. He practiced striking against mattresses. He realized quickly that punching metal with bare hands was stupid. He wrapped his hands in thick bandages, then duct tape. He found a rusted steel pipe, heavy, solid lead, and practiced swinging it. If I can't shoot fire, he reasoned, swinging the pipe until his shoulders burned, I will hit you with something that hurts as much as fire. He was becoming feral. At school, the change was subtle at first. Izuku was too tired to mutter. He was too sore to flinch when Bakugo slammed a hand on his desk. "Oi, Deku!" Bakugo barked one Tuesday, 3 months into the training. "You've been ignoring me. You think you're better than me?" Izuku looked up. His eyes were shadowed, dark circles prominent against his pale skin. But his gaze wasn't wavering. He was calculating the distance between Bakugo's palm and his face. He was noting the way Bakugo leaned his weight on his right foot. "I'm just tired, Kaken," Izuku said quietly. "Don't give me that crap." Bakugo raised a hand, sparks crackling. In the past, Izuku would have cowered. He would have raised his arms to protect his face. This time, Izuku didn't move. He just stared at the sparking palm. Nitroglycerin sweat, Izuku thought. Right hook dominant. Extensive wind-up. If I step inside his guard and drive an elbow into his ribs, he loses breath control. The thought was clinical. Cold. Whatever, Bakugo scoffed, unnerved by the lack of reaction. He kicked Izuku's desk and walked away. Useless nerd. Izuku watched him go. He didn't feel fear. He felt disappointment. He telegraphed that kick, Izuku noted. Sloppy. Month 5. The beach was changing. A small clearing had appeared near the water. A patch of pristine white sand, surrounded by walls of garbage. It was 4:30 a.m. It was raining. Izuku was shirtless, wearing only ragged gym shorts and his ruined sneakers. His body was unrecognizable from the boy in the tunnel. The ribs were covered by slabs of lean, corded muscle. His back was a map of definition, shifting as he moved. He wasn't bulky like All Might. He didn't have the frame for it. He was built like a whip. Compact. Dense. He was practicing high kicks on a stack of tires. Snap. 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 His shins slammed into the rubber with rhythmic thuds. He ignored the stinging pain. Pain was information. Pain meant he was still awake. Your form is off. The voice came from the top of the trash pile to his left. Izuku spun around, dropping into a defensive crouch instantly. He snatched up his steel pipe from the sand, holding it ready. A figure stood atop a mountain of broken microwaves. Black clothes. Gray capture weapon. Tired eyes. Izuku froze. Eraserhead. The underground hero looked down at him. He looked bored, but his eyes were sharp. "You're telegraphing the kick with your shoulder," Eraserhead said, his voice flat. "And you're off balance when you land. If I swept your leg, you'd be eating sand." Izuku lowered the pipe slowly, but he didn't drop it. "Who are you?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Eraserhead raised an eyebrow. "A concerned citizen watching a teenager beat up garbage in the rain at 4 in the morning. He jumped down." He landed silently. No impact sound. Izuku tensed. "Relax, kid. I'm not here to arrest you for illegal dumping. Though technically, you're illegal undumping." Eraserhead looked around the clearing. "You moved all this?" "Yes." "Why?" "Training." "For what?" Izuku hesitated. If he said Yue, the man might laugh. Or tell him to quit. But looking at the man who had inspired this entire dark path, Izuku couldn't lie. To be a hero. Eraserhead looked him over. He looked at the scars on Izuku's hands. He looked at the steel pipe. He looked at the lack of any visible quirk usage. "What's your quirk?" Eraserhead asked. "I don't have one." The silence stretched between them, heavier than the rain. Eraserhead didn't laugh. His expression didn't change. He simply hummed. "Rational," he muttered. "Most kids without quirks give up." Or they delude themselves into thinking spirit is enough. He walked closer. Izuku stiffened. Eraserhead reached out and tapped the steel pipe in Izuku's hand. Weapons are good. But a weapon is a crutch if you can't use your body. Suddenly Eraserhead moved. It was a blur. He swept his leg low. Izuku reacted on instinct. He didn't try to block, he jumped. He cleared the sweep, landing on his hands and flipping backward to create distance. He landed in the sand, panting. Eraserhead looked mildly impressed. Reflexes are decent. I watched your videos, Izuku blurted out. The fight against the mutant gang in Narahata. The takedown of the sludge trafficker. Those videos aren't supposed to exist, Eraserhead sighed, rubbing his neck. I need to talk to the cybersecurity team again. He looked back at Izuku. You have no quirk, Eraserhead stated. That means you have zero margin for error. One mistake you die. One missed block, broken bones. The world isn't fair to people like you. I know, Izuku said. His voice was hard. I'm not asking for it to be fair. I'm preparing for it to be unfair. Eraserhead stared at him for a long moment. He saw something in the boy's green eyes. It wasn't the starry-eyed hope of the kids at UA. It was the desperate, hungry look of a survivor. It was the same look Aizawa saw in the mirror every morning. Your center of gravity is too high, Aizawa said, turning away. When you kick, pivot on the ball of your foot, not the heel. And tuck your chin. A villain won't aim for your chest. They'll aim for your jaw to shut off your lights. He began to walk away, scaling the pile of trash. Wait! Izuku called out. Will you teach me? Eraserhead didn't look back. I'm not a teacher. Not yet anyway. He paused at the top of the pile. But if you're still here next week, try not to break your own ankles. It creates paperwork for the police. He vanished into the gloom. Izuku stood in the rain. A small, genuine smile broke across his face, the first one in 5 months. He turned back to the tire stack. Pivot on the ball of the foot. Tuck the chin. He kicked. Thwack. The sound was sharper. Harder. Again, Izuku whispered. Month 9. The beach was gone. In its place was a sprawling expanse of golden sand, stretching from the street to the ocean. The water sparkled under the morning sun. It was a miracle. The locals were baffled. The news ran a small segment on the mystery cleaner of Dagoba. Izuku stood at the top of the stairs. He was taller now. He had hit a growth spurt, fueled by the insane protein intake and heavy lifting. He stood at 5 feet 7 inches, but he looked bigger because of his posture. He didn't slouch anymore. He stood with the relaxed readiness of a predator. He wore his school uniform. It was tight around the shoulders. He held a new notebook in his hand. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 14. But the inside was different. Page 1 Bakugo Katsuki. Weaknesses, emotional volatility. Over-reliance on right arm. Tunnel vision when angered. Joint stress in winter. Counter-strategy. Flashbangs to blind. Low sweeps. Grappling in close quarters to neutralize explosion range. It wasn't a fan book. It was a dossier. He closed the book. Tomorrow was the UA entrance exam. He looked at his hands. They were rough, covered in calluses and small scars. The hands of a worker. The hands of a fighter. He didn't have one for all. He couldn't smash a robot with a single punch. He couldn't leap tall buildings in a single bound. He reached into his bag and pulled out a pair of custom-made gloves he had cobbled together from work gear and athletic tape. He pulled them on. He tightened the straps. He took a deep breath. The air smelled of salt and possibility. I don't need a miracle, Izuku said to the ocean. He turned around and began the walk to the train station. The silence of the tunnel was gone. In his head, there was only the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Steady. Strong. Unyielding. He was ready to break down the gates. Month 1. The biology of desperation. The alarm clock didn't beep. It didn't have the chance. Izuku's hand slammed down on the button at 3:59 a.m., 1 minute before the designated wake-up time. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling where All Might used to smile down at him. Now, there was only the faint, ghostly outline of a rectangle where the poster had shielded the wallpaper from the sun. His body felt like it had been dismantled and reassembled by someone who lost the instructions. His shoulders were knots of fire. His lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. His fingers were stiff, curled into claws that refused to straighten fully without coaxing. "Get up," he whispered to the silence. His voice was raspy. He hadn't spoken much in the last week. He rolled out of bed, his feet hitting the cold floor. The shock sent a shiver up his spine, waking the rest of his nervous system. He moved mechanically through the dark room, pulling on the gray hoodie that was already beginning to smell permanently of salt and rust, despite Inko's aggressive laundering. The kitchen was the first battlefield of the day, in the canon of heroics, the one playing out in the shiny magazines and TV specials. Heroes ate balanced meals prepared by nutritionists. They drank revitalizing serums. Izuku Midoriya ate slop. He opened the fridge and pulled out a Tupperware container of boiled chicken breast, unsalted and dry as chalkboard erasers. Beside it, a container of brown rice and steamed broccoli that had turned a sad army green. He dumped it all into a blender. He added water. He added a scoop of cheap, bulk-buy protein powder that claimed to be chocolate fudge but tasted like dirt and chemicals. He pulsed the blender for 5 seconds, just enough to liquidate the solids, short enough not to wake his mother. He stared at the beige slurry. It was revolting. It was necessary. He chugged it. His stomach rebelled, cramping violently, but he forced it down, clamping a hand over his mouth until the nausea subsided. Calories. Nitrogen. Amino acids. That was all it was. It wasn't food. It was construction material. He rinsed the cup, put on his shoes, and slipped out the window. Dagoba Beach was waiting for him. In the first month, the beach wasn't a gym. It was a humiliating teacher. Izuku stood before a rusted washing machine. It was half buried in the sand, entangled with fishing nets and driftwood. "Lift with the legs," he muttered. "Keep the back straight. Engage the core." He had read this in the Fundamentals of Kinesiology, a heavy textbook he had borrowed from the municipal library. He had spent the last 3 days memorizing diagrams of muscle groups. He knew that the erector spinae supported the column, and the gluteus maximus was the primary driver of power. Knowing it and doing it were two different things. He gripped the washing machine. The metal bit into his palms through the gardening gloves. He pulled. Nothing happened. The sand created a vacuum seal. The waterlogged weight of the machine was immense. "Come on!" he strained. His vision spotted with white stars. A sharp pain shot up his hamstring. He gasped and let go, falling backward into a pile of plastic bottles. He lay there, panting, the smell of rotting kelp filling his nose. Failure. Again. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't dragging a fridge with a hero on his back. He was a 14-year-old boy fighting a washing machine, and the washing machine was winning. "Physics," he hissed, sitting up and wiping sand from his face. "If force isn't enough, change the angle." He found a long, sturdy piece of driftwood and a cinder block. He jammed the wood under the machine, using the block as a fulcrum. "Archimedes," he thought. "Give me a lever long enough." He jumped onto the end of the wood. Crack! The driftwood snapped. Izuku tumbled face first into the sand. He lay there for a long time. The sun was starting to rise, casting long shadows over the garbage. He felt tears pricking his eyes, hot, frustrated tears. "Stupid," he sobbed quietly. "You're so stupid." But he didn't go home. He found a metal pipe this time. A piece of scaffolding. He set the fulcrum again. He pushed. With a wet, sucking sound, the washing machine popped free from the sand. Izuku stared at it. It was tipped over. It wasn't moved to the truck yet, but it was free. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. 1, he counted. By the time he had dragged the machine to the designated pile near the road, it was 6:30 a.m. He had moved 1 item. There were millions left. He collapsed against the seawall, his chest heaving. He pulled a notebook from his bag, not a hero analysis book, but a black composition notebook. He wrote, Day 14. Leverage is key. Pure strength is inefficient. Need better gloves. Need better grip. He looked at the words. They were messy, written with a shaking hand. "I need to be smarter," he whispered. "I can't just be strong. I don't have time to be strong enough." Month 3. The ghost of Aldera Junior High. School became a fugue state. Izuku walked the halls like a specter. He sat in his chair, staring blankly at the blackboard. The equations on the board, quadratic formulas, history dates, seemed trivial compared to the physics of hauling a transmission engine up a flight of stairs. His classmates noticed. Or rather, they noticed that he wasn't there to be noticed. The Deku they knew was twitchy. He muttered. He flinched. He tried too hard to be liked. This new Izuku was silent. He sat perfectly still to conserve energy. When the bell rang, he didn't rush to talk to anyone. He put his head down on the desk and slept for 10 minutes, waking up exactly when the next teacher entered. Midoriya, the math teacher, barked, slamming a ruler on his desk. Are you with us? Izuku raised his head slowly. His eyes were bloodshot. There were dark circles under them that looked like bruises. Yes, sir, he said. His voice was flat. Solve problem 4. Izuku looked at the board. He didn't blink. X equals -3. Show your work. I did it in my head. The class tittered. Bakugo turned around in his seat, his eyes narrowing. Don't lie, useless, Bakugo sneered. You were sleeping. Izuku looked at Bakugo. In the past, Izuku would have panicked. Kaken, sorry. I was thinking. Now, Izuku just looked at him. He looked at the way Bakugo's shoulder twitched, a tell he had identified in analysis number 14. He looked at the exposed neck. I wasn't sleeping, Izuku said calmly. I was resting. He turned back to the teacher. May I go to the bathroom? The teacher, unsettled by the deadness in the boy's eyes, just waved him away. In the bathroom, Izuku splashed cold water on his face. He looked in the mirror. He looked older. Gaunt. His cheeks were hollowed out. The baby fat was gone, burned away by the metabolism of a furnace. He rolled up his sleeves. His arms were a map of violence. Bruises in various stages of healing, yellow, purple, green. Long scratches from jagged metal. A burn mark from a car battery that had leaked acid. He touched a particularly nasty gash on his forearm. He had superglued it shut the night before because he couldn't afford stitches and couldn't explain them to Inko. Hide it, he told his reflection. He rolled the sleeves down. He buttoned the cuffs tight. When he walked out of the stall, Bakugo was waiting. Katsuki was leaning against the sinks, arms crossed. The air in the bathroom grew hot. What are you doing, Deku? Katsuki asked. His voice was low, lacking its usual explosive volume. It was dangerous. Using the bathroom, Izuku said, walking to the door. Katsuki stepped in his way. He shoved Izuku's shoulder. Don't give me that crap. You look like a zombie. You smell like... Katsuki sniffed. Like garbage and seawater. What the hell are you doing, Hobby? Izuku said. You think you're training? Katsuki let out a short, harsh laugh. You think running around in the mud is going to help you get into UA? You're quirkless, Deku. You're nothing. Izuku felt a spark of anger. Not the white-hot rage from the bedroom, but a cold, simmering resentment. Move, Kaken, Izuku said. Katsuki's eyes widened. Ha! What did you say? I said move. Izuku didn't raise his voice. He shifted his weight. He dropped his center of gravity slightly, a habit he was picking up from the judo videos. I have class. Katsuki stared at him. For a second, he looked ready to blow Izuku's face off. But there was something in Izuku's posture, something solid, that made him pause. It wasn't confidence. It was indifference. Izuku wasn't afraid of the explosion anymore because he faced things sharper and heavier than Bakugo every morning. Katsuki scoffed and stepped aside, bumping Izuku hard as he passed. You're gonna get yourself killed, idiot. Maybe, Izuku murmured as the door closed behind him. Month 4, the laboratory of pain. The library internet was slow, but it was free. Izuku sat in the back corner, headphones plugged in, watching a video titled Krav Maga, Disarming a Knife Attacker. He paused the video. Rewound. Played at 0.5x speed. He sketched the movement in his notebook. Step 1, deflect the forearm, not the blade. Step 2, control the wrist. Step 3, strike the throat or groin. Step 4, disengage. He wrote a note in the margin. Theory is easy. Practice requires a partner. He didn't have a partner. He had trash. That night, at the beach, he built Wilson. Wilson was a monstrosity. He was a torso made of duct-tape pillows stuffed with sand, mounted on a rusted metal pole that Izuku had driven deep into the ground. He had arms made of PVC pipes and springs salvaged from a mattress. "Okay, Wilson," Izuku said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Knife attack. Right hand. He swung the PVC arm at himself. He tried to deflect. He missed. The pipe cracked him across the cheekbone. "Ow!" Izuku hissed, stumbling back. He touched his face. It was going to swell. Again. He swung the arm. He caught it this time, but his grip slipped. The pipe spun and hit him in the ribs. Again. He did it for 3 hours. By the end, his forearms were black and blue from the impacts. His face was throbbing, but on the last attempt, he caught the pipe, twisted his body, and drove his knee into Wilson's groin, a wad of bubble wrap. He panted, sweat dripping from his nose. "It works," he whispered. He moved on to judo. He learned suinage, the shoulder throw. He couldn't throw Wilson, the pole was fixed. So he practiced the entry. The kazushi, breaking balance. He practiced on loose tires. He would grab a tire, spin, load it onto his back, and throw. Over and over. Hundreds of times a night. He wasn't learning martial arts to win points. He was learning how to end fights quickly. He started a new section in his notebook, Anatomy of Weakness. The liver. A strike here causes immediate biological shutdown. The solar plexus. Diaphragm paralysis. The knees. Only takes 40 pounds of pressure to dislocate laterally. He studied these spots like religious texts. He didn't have the power to punch through a wall. He had to be a surgeon with a sledgehammer. One night, he found a stray cat watching him from a pile of newspapers. "Hey," Izuku wheezed, pausing mid-squat with a microwave in his hands. The cat meowed. "You think my form is bad too?" The cat yawned. "Yeah," Izuku grunted, standing up. "Me too." Month 5. The lie. Inko Midoriya was not a stupid woman. She was a worried one. She watched her son shrink and grow at the same time. He was getting thinner in the face, but his shirts were getting tight around the arms. He ate like a starving wolf. He slept like the dead, and the smells. The smell of antiseptic. The smell of deep heat muscle cream. One evening, Izuku was sitting at the dinner table, pushing a piece of fish around his plate. His right hand was trembling uncontrollably. "Izuku?" Inko asked softly. "HM?" He didn't look up. "Your hand." Izuku froze. He quickly put his hand in his lap. "It's nothing." "Cramp from writing." Inko put her chopsticks down. "You've been different lately." "Since the sludge villain?" "I'm fine, Mom. Are you being bullied again? Is Katsuki hurting you?" Izuku looked up. His eyes were clear. "No. Katsuki doesn't touch me anymore." "Then what is it?" "You leave the house so early. You come back so late. You look exhausted." She reached across the table and took his hand. Izuku winced. He couldn't help it. Her thumb had pressed directly onto a raw blister on his palm. Inko pulled his hand toward her and rolled up his sleeve. She gasped. The bruising was extensive. Yellow and green blotches covered his forearm. There were small cuts, scrapes, and the shiny pink skin of new scars. "Izuku!" She stood up, her chair scraping back. "What is this? Who did this?" Izuku pulled his hand back, tucking it under the table. His heart hammered. He couldn't tell her. If he told her he was training to be a hero, a quirkless hero, she would stop him. She would cry. She would beg him to be safe. And he couldn't handle her begging. He wasn't strong enough to say no to her tears. "I joined a club," he lied. The lie tasted like ash. "A club?" "Rugby," he said. It was the first thing that came to mind. "We play rough." It's contact sports, Mom. Everyone gets bruised." Inko stared at him. Tears welled up in her large green eyes. "Rugby? Since when do you play rugby?" "Since I realized I needed to get stronger," Izuku said. This part, at least, was true. "I was weak in the tunnel, Mom. I almost died because I was weak. I don't want to be weak anymore." Inko looked at him. She saw the set of his jaw. The hardness that had replaced the soft, round cheeks of her baby boy. She didn't believe him. Not entirely. But she saw that he wasn't going to tell her the truth. Izuku, she whispered. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're my son. That's enough. Izuku looked down at his plate. I know, Mom, but it's not enough for me, he thought. And it's not enough for the world. Later that night, he heard her crying in her room. He sat on his bed, gripping his knees. He hated himself. He hated lying to her. I'll make it worth it, he promised the darkness. When I get into UA, she'll see. She'll understand. He put on his hoodie and climbed out the window. Month 7, the ghost in the rain. It was raining. A torrential downpour that turned the Dagoba mud into sludge and made the piles of trash slippery and treacherous. Most people would have stayed inside. Izuku was currently wrestling a rusted engine block. He had cleared about 40% of the beach. It was becoming noticeable now. There were pathways. There were clearings. The locals had stopped calling the police on the vagrant because they realized the vagrant was actually doing the city's job. Izuku was shirtless. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. Steam rose from his shoulders, the heat of his exertion battling the cold air. He had the engine block on a sled made of car bonnets. He was pulling it with a rope wrapped around his waist, trudging through the sand like a draft horse. Pull, he grunted. Pull, he slipped. His face hit the mud. He scrambled up, spitting out grit, and pulled again. He was so focused he didn't hear the footsteps. You're going to tear a ligament doing that. The voice was dry, tired, and cut through the sound of the rain like a knife. Izuku spun around, dropping into a crouch. He grabbed a length of pipe from the sand, his bow staff, and held it in a defensive guard. Standing atop a pile of crushed refrigerators was a man. He looked like he had just rolled out of a dumpster. Messy black hair, stubble, bloodshot eyes, and a massive gray scarf wrapped around his neck. He wore black fatigues and a utility belt. Izuku's eyes widened. He lowered the pipe slightly. Eraserhead. He recognized him instantly. The hero from the grainy videos. The underground legend. Eraserhead looked down at him with an expression of utter boredom mixed with mild curiosity. Reaction time is decent, the hero drawled. But your stance is too wide. If I rush you, you wouldn't be able to pivot. Izuku stared. You're Eraserhead. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. You know me? Yes. Underground hero. Specializes in stealth and capture. Quirk, erasure. Izuku rattled it off automatically, his old fanba habits surfacing for a split second before he clamped his mouth shut. Eraserhead jumped down. He fell 10 feet and landed without a sound. The sand didn't even shift. Izuku tensed. Every instinct screamed danger. This man was a pro. A veteran. Relax, kid, Eraserhead said, walking closer. He stopped 5 feet away. I'm not here to arrest you. Unless you're dumping this engine. I'm cleaning, Izuku said, his voice hoarse. I can see that. Eraserhead looked around the beach. He looked at the cleared zones. He looked at the massive piles of sorted trash. You did all this? Yes. Why? Training. Eraserhead looked back at him. His dark eyes seemed to X-ray Izuku, assessing the muscle definition, the scars, the way he held the pipe. For UA? Eraserhead guessed. Izuku nodded. What's your quirk? The question. The wall. Izuku gripped the pipe tighter. I don't have one. He waited for the laugh. He waited for the go home, kid. He waited for the pity. Eraserhead didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stared at Izuku for a long, uncomfortable minute. Quirkless, Eraserhead repeated. And you want to be a hero? Yes. It's illogical, Eraserhead said bluntly. You'll be fighting people who can level buildings. You'll be a liability. I know, Izuku snapped. The anger flared again, the defiance that fueled his 4 a.m. wake-ups. I know the statistics. I know the odds. But I'm not doing this because I think it's easy. I'm doing it because no one else is. He pointed the pipe at the engine block. Heroes rely on their quirks too much, Izuku said, echoing his own thoughts from months of analysis. They treat them like hammers and every problem like a nail. But what happens when the hammer breaks? What happens when the villain is immune? He looked Eraserhead in the eye. You fight quirkless, Izuku said. I watched you. You erased their power, and then you beat them with your hands. You don't need a quirk to take someone down. You need technique. Eraserhead's eyebrows shot up. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. You've been studying me. I study everyone, Eraserhead hummed. He took a step forward. Show me. What? Attack me? Izuku hesitated. You're a pro, and you're wasting time. Attack me? Izuku didn't wait. He lunged. He used the pipe like a spear, thrusting toward Eraserhead's chest. It was a feint. He expected Eraserhead to dodge. Eraserhead didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack. His hand shot out, grabbing the pipe. With a flick of his wrist, he twisted it. The torque was immense. Izuku's grip broke. The pipe went flying. Eraserhead swept his leg. Izuku saw the sky, then the rain, then the sand. Wham! He hit the ground hard. The air left his lungs. Before he could scramble up, a black boot was pressing gently but firmly on his chest. You're dead, Eraserhead said. Izuku gasped, clawing at the sand. Eraserhead removed his foot. You rely on your eyes too much. You looked at my chest before you thrust. A villain will read that. Izuku sat up, coughing. How did you know I was fainting? Center of gravity, Eraserhead said. He tapped his own solar plexus. Your eyes lie. Your hands lie. But your center of gravity never lies. When you prepare to change direction, your weight shifts before your body moves. Watch the hips. Watch the core. He reached a hand down. Izuku stared at it. The hand of a hero. Not a golden god, but a tired man in the rain. Izuku took it. Eraserhead pulled him up. You have no quirk, Eraserhead said again. That means you have no shield. You can't tank hits. You have to be perfect. I will be, Izuku said. We'll see. Eraserhead turned and began to walk away, his scarf trailing behind him like a tail. Wait! Izuku called out. Eraserhead stopped. Are you going to stop me? Eraserhead glanced back over his shoulder. A tiny, crooked grin touched his lips. It was terrifying. I'm an underground hero, kid. I don't stop people from cleaning up trash. Just try not to die before the entrance exam. It would be a waste of potential. He vanished into the shadows of the junk piles. Izuku stood there, the rain soaking him to the bone. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. He wasn't dismissed. He was critiqued. Watch the hips, Izuku whispered. Center of gravity. He picked up the pipe. Again. Month 9, the mechanic, the final stretch. The beach was 80% clear. The training had evolved. Izuku wasn't just lifting anymore. He was engineering. He had raided the scrap piles for parts. He needed gear. He couldn't afford support items, so he made them. He found a pair of heavy-duty work boots with steel toes. He reinforced the soles with layers of compressed rubber from tires. He added metal plating to the shins using scrap aluminum and rivets. Iron soles, he muttered, lacing them up. They were heavy. Clunky. But when he kicked a wooden pallet, the wood shattered. He made bracers for his forearms out of thick PVC pipe wrapped in leather from an old sofa. He was turning himself into a tank. His notebook, Analysis number 14, was full. He started number 15. Subject: Zero Gravity, Uraraka Ochako Hypothetical. Strategy: if gravity is negated, friction is the only movement method. Use grappling hooks or air propulsion. Subject: Engine, Ida Tenya Hypothetical. Strategy: stall the engine. Clog the exhaust pipes. Leg sweeps are ineffective due to armor. Aim for the joints. He was simulating battles in his head constantly. He walked down the street analyzing passers-by. That man has a heteromorphic arm type. Heavy right side. Dodge left. He was obsessed. He was terrifyingly focused. One afternoon, he passed a mirror in a shop window. He stopped. The boy in the reflection wasn't Izuku Midoriya anymore. Not really. His neck was thick. His jaw was sharp. His hair was a wild green mess that he had chopped short with kitchen scissors because it got in the way. His eyes had lost their shine. They were intense, scanning, calculating. He looked like a soldier who had been at war for 10 years, not 10 months. You look scary, he told his reflection. He didn't smile. Month 10, the scream. The final day. February 26th. The UA entrance exam was in 6 hours. It was 4 a.m. Dagoba Beach was silent. There was no trash. The sand stretched out, golden and pristine, for half a mile. The water lapped gently at the shore, free of oil slicks and floating bottles. The sunrise was painting the sky in hues of violent violet and blood orange. Izuku stood in the center of the beach. He was standing on top of the last pile, the collection point where the municipal trucks would come later. He was wearing his makeshift hero costume, the steel-toed boots, the gray hoodie, sleeves cut off, the arm guards, and cargo pants filled with pockets containing scavenged tools, wrenches, tape, marbles. He looked out at the ocean. He remembered the day All Might left him. He remembered the feeling of smallness. He took a deep breath. His lungs expanded, massive and powerful within his ribcage. He had done it. He hadn't asked for help. He hadn't received a hair to eat. He hadn't been blessed. He had bled for this. Every grain of sand on this beach knew his sweat. A surge of emotion, repressed for 10 months, clawed its way up his throat. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was triumph. Savage, unadulterated triumph. Izuku threw his head back and screamed. Ahaha! The sound tore out of him, echoing off the seawall, rolling out over the waves. It was a roar. A challenge to the gods who had built the world for quirks. I am here, the scream said. I am here, and I am empty-handed, and I am going to break you. He screamed until his throat felt raw. He screamed until his knees shook. Then silence returned. The sun broke the horizon. Izuku wiped his mouth. He adjusted his gloves. He picked up his yellow backpack. It looked comically small on his broad back now. Time to go, he said. He walked up the stairs, leaving the clean beach behind. He didn't look back. The beach was the past. Uehai was the future, and Izuku Midoriya was coming for it. The entrance exam, prelude. The gates of Uehai were massive. They were designed to intimidate. Hundreds of students streamed through them. Some had mutant features, horns, tails, blue skin. Some crackled with energy. They laughed, they chatted, they exuded confidence. Izuku walked among them. He was silent. He felt the gaze before he heard the voice. Deku. Izuku stopped. He turned slowly. Bakugo stood there. He looked furious, confused, and slightly disturbed. He was looking at Izuku's arms, exposed by the sleeveless hoodie. He had changed into his gym uniform for the practical, but the bulk remained. Get out of my way, Bakugo growled. Or are you just here to watch? Izuku looked at Bakugo. He saw the sweat on Bakugo's brow. He saw the nervous twitch of his fingers. He's anxious, Izuku realized. The great Katsuki Bakugo is nervous. I'm not watching, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. I'm participating. Without a quirk? Bakugo stepped closer, smoke rising from his palms. You're gonna die. They'll kill you in there. Go home and play hero with your action figures. Izuku stepped into Bakugo's space. He was still shorter, but he felt dense as lead. I destroyed my action figures, Kaken, Izuku whispered. He leaned in close. I don't need plastic heroes anymore. He walked past Bakugo, his shoulder checking the blonde hard enough to make him stumble back a step. Bakugo stood there, stunned, watching the green-haired boy disappear into the crowd. Izuku didn't look back. He walked toward the auditorium. He checked his pockets. Pocket 1, metal bearings. Pocket 2, high-tension wire. Pocket 3, screwdriver. Boots, steel. Preset locked. He walked into the darkness of the hall, ready to prove the world wrong. The written exam was a sanctuary. For the vast majority of the examinees sitting in the cavernous lecture hall of Uehai, this was the boring part. It was the hurdle before the sprint, the vegetables before the dessert. Around him, Izuku could hear the nervous tapping of feet, the sighing of bored teenagers, and the scratching of pencils held by hands itching to release fire or lightning. For Izuku Midoriya, however, this was the only battlefield where the ground was level. He sat perfectly still, his back straight, his eyes scanning the paper with predatory focus. Question 42. In a scenario involving a villain with a gigantification quirk in a dense urban environment, Category 4 zoning, prioritize the following collateral damage mitigation strategies. Izuku didn't just answer. He dissected. His pencil moved in a blur. Priority 1. Structural integrity of surrounding high-rises. A falling giant causes seismic waves. Evacuation radius must be calculated based on the villain's height times 1.5. Priority 2, utility lines. Gas mains in this district run shallow. Rupture risk is 80%. Priority 3, engagement. Lure the target toward the river or open parkland to minimize debris hazards. He wrote until the graphite tip dulled, then swapped pencils seamlessly. To the other students, this was a test of memory. To Izuku, it was a test of survival. He knew the laws because he had to know exactly what lines he was crossing. He knew the physics because he couldn't defy them. He had to exploit them. He knew the history of heroics because he needed to know where his predecessors had failed. He finished 20 minutes early. He didn't put his head down. He reviewed his answers. He checked for traps. He checked for trick questions designed to weed out the arrogant. Question 55. Is the preservation of the villain's life a priority during a hostage situation involving a catastrophic quirk? Izuku stared at the question. The heroic answer was yes, all life is sacred. The realistic answer, the one Eraserhead might give, was the hostage comes first. The villain is a variable to be neutralized. Izuku wrote, the primary objective is the safety of the innocent. The villain's life is secondary but must be preserved if possible to prevent psychological trauma to the victims and legal complications for the agency. However, if the catastrophic quirk reaches critical mass, neutralization is the only logical path to prevent mass casualties. He put his pencil down. The bell rang. Around him, students groaned and stretched. Izuku simply exhaled, a long, controlled breath. Part 1 conquered. The auditorium was a different beast. It was loud, dark, and filled with the nervous energy of 2,000 teenagers. Present Mike stood on the stage, a silhouette against a massive screen, screaming into a microphone that probably wasn't even turned on. Everybody say hey. Silence greeted him. Izuku sat in the middle row. He was hunched over the orientation pamphlet, his eyes darting back and forth between the map of the battle centers and the enemy descriptions. 1-pointer, speed type. Weak armor. Wheels. 2-pointer, power type. Heavy plating. Slow. 3-pointer, balanced. Ranged weaponry likely. Tough crowd. Present Mike shrugged. Alright, listen up listeners. Here's the lowdown on your practical. As the voice hero explained the point system, Izuku was already running simulations. 10 minutes. Urban setting. Mock city. Robots. That means no pain response. No fear. They won't hesitate. I can't punch metal. I'll break my hand on the first swing. I need a tool. I need leverage, he began muttering. It was a low, rapid-fire stream of consciousness that had become his default state during analysis. Robots have sensors. Likely visual and thermal. If I can blind them, mud? No, too slow. Paint? Don't have any. The joints are the weak points. Exposed hydraulics. The neck cabling. If I can sever the connection between the CPU and the chassis. Excuse me. The voice cut through Izuku's mutterings like a blade. Izuku stopped. He looked up to see a tall boy with glasses and blue hair standing up in the row in front of him. He was pointing an accusing finger directly at Izuku's face. A spotlight swiveled, blindingly bright, to illuminate them. You've been muttering this entire time, the boy announced, his voice projecting clearly across the auditorium. It's distracting. If you're here to mess around, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium went silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at the green-haired boy. In another life, Izuku would have shrunk. He would have apologized, stuttered, and turned beet red. He would have let the shame swallow him whole. But the Izuku sitting here today had spent 10 months moving refrigerators in the rain. He had been choked out by Eraserhead. He had screamed his lungs raw at the ocean. He didn't feel shame. He felt annoyance. Izuku stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked directly at the boy with glasses. I am analyzing the threat, Izuku said. His voice was not loud, but it was steady, carried by the acoustics of the silent room. We are about to enter a combat zone against mechanized enemies. Formulating a strategy is not messing around. It is the bare minimum requirement for survival. The blue-haired boy blinked, taken aback by the cold logic of the response. Well, it's still disruptive too. And you, Izuku continued, gesturing to the pamphlet in the boy's hand. You interrupted the pro-hero to ask about the fourth robot silhouette on the handout. A silhouette that is clearly labeled 0 points if you read the fine print at the bottom of page 3. Izuku pointed to the stage. You are wasting time. Sit down, the auditorium gasped. Even Bakugo, sitting a few rows over, looked back with wide eyes. The nerd had grown teeth. The boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, turned red. He looked at his pamphlet, saw the fine print, and stiffened. He bowed rigidly to present Mike. My apologies, sir. I was overzealous. He sat down abruptly. All right. Present Mike shouted, breaking the tension. I like the fire. But the examinee is right. The fourth robot is an obstacle. A gimmick. Like a thwomp in Mario. If you see it, run. Izuku sat back down. He ignored the whispers around him. Did you see that guy? He took that rich kid apart. He looks intense. Izuku went back to his pamphlet. 0 pointer. Huge. Avoid at all costs. Battle Center B. The bus ride was silent. Izuku stood near the back, holding the strap. He was wearing his costume. It wasn't much. A dark green tracksuit he had reinforced with duct tape and patches of leather. His iron soles, the steel-toed work boots modified with layers of tire rubber. His utility belt, salvaged from a construction site, containing a few simple tools, a screwdriver, a roll of electrical tape, and a handful of ball bearings. He looked like a mechanic prepared for a riot. Around him, other students were stretching, showing off their quirks. A boy with a laser belt. A girl with pink skin and horns. They looked flashy. They looked like heroes. Izuku looked at his hands. They were wrapped in white athletic tape, tight and secure. The bus hissed to a halt in front of a massive gate. The mock city was enormous, a sprawling metropolis of concrete and glass that looked disturbingly real. The students filed out. It's huge, someone whispered. Izuku didn't gawk. He scanned the environment. Pavement, concrete. Good traction. Buildings reinforced. Fire escapes visible. Verticality is an option. Debris, loose bricks, piping. Weapons. He spotted Ochako Uraraka in the crowd. She looked nervous, clutching her chest. He remembered her from the entrance. He had saved her from tripping with a quick grab of her arm, but hadn't spoken much. He considered wishing her luck. It was the polite thing to do. No, he decided. Distraction. He moved to the front of the pack, positioning himself near the gate. Hey, look at that guy, a student whispered behind him. He doesn't have any gear. Is his quirk physical? Maybe he's a transformation type? He looks kinda beat up. Look at those scars on his arms. Izuku ignored them. He crouched into a sprinter's stance. All right, listeners. Present Mick's voice boomed from the observation towers. Are you ready? The crowd tensed, waiting for the countdown. Start. The crowd hesitated. They were conditioned for 3, 2, 1. Izuku was gone. The moment the first syllable of start left the speaker, Izuku launched himself forward. His reinforced boots dug into the asphalt. He exploded off the line, leaving the confused pack behind. What are you waiting for? Mike yelled. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 The stampede began behind him, but Izuku already had a 100-meter lead. He turned the first corner into the city proper. Target acquired. A 1-pointer. It was a sleek, monowheel drone with spindly arms. It locked onto him, its singular red eye glowing. Target detected. Eliminate. It surged forward, moving fast. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He ran at it. Speed type. It relies on momentum. If I dodge left, it will overcorrect. The robot lunged. Izuku slid. He dropped to his knees, his momentum carrying him under the robot's outstretched arm. As he slid past, he saw it, the exposed wiring cluster at the waist joint, just above the wheel. Izuku didn't have a sword. He didn't have super strength. He reached into his belt and pulled out a heavy, rusted screwdriver. With a grunt of exertion, he jammed the screwdriver into the wiring cluster and twisted. Sparks showered him. The robot screeched, a digital wail of error. Its wheel locked up. The momentum flipped it forward, crashing face first into the concrete with a sickening crunch of metal. Izuku rolled to his feet, not even looking back. 1 point. He kept running. Observation room. A wall of monitors flickered in the dark room. The faculty of UA High sat in tiered seating, watching the chaos unfold. An energetic batch this year, Midnight commented, licking her lips. Lots of destructive power in Center A and C. Power isn't everything, Cementos rumbled. Control matters. Indeed, a high, squeaky voice agreed. Principal Nizas sat with his paws folded over a cup of tea. His beady black eyes were darting from screen to screen. We have the flashy ones, Niza said, pointing to a screen where Bakugo was blowing the head off a three-pointer. But the true test is adaptability. Who is that? Snipe pointed a gloved finger at a screen from Battle Center B. On the monitor, a green blur was moving through an alleyway. Midoriya Izuku, Eraserhead, spoke up from the back corner, where he was leaning against the wall, looking half asleep. The quirkless applicant. Quirkless? Vlad King scoffed. He shouldn't even be here. He's going to get himself killed. Watch, Aizawa said softly. On the screen, Izuku was cornered by two two-pointers. These were hulking, scorpion-like machines. The boy didn't panic. He scrambled up a fire escape, luring them. The robots tried to climb the wall, their heavy claws digging into the brick. When the first robot was halfway up, the boy kicked a heavy flower pot off the railing. It fell, smashing directly onto the robot's visual sensor. The robot flailed, blinded. It lost its grip and fell backward, landing on top of the second robot. The impact crushed the second robot's chassis. The boy jumped down, landing on the pile of scrap. He used a jagged piece of metal pipe, salvaged from who knows where, to pry open the chest plate of the top robot and rip out the battery core. 2 kills. No quirk, Snipe whistled. Kid's brutal. He fights like a street brawler, Midnight noted. Dirty. Efficient. He fights like he has no other choice, Aizawa muttered. Battle Center B, 5 minutes remaining. Izuku was breathing hard. His lungs burned. Sweat stung his eyes. A shallow cut on his cheek was bleeding, dripping onto his collar. 28 points. It wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. He had heard people talking about getting 40, 50 points. He was holding a weapon now. A 4-foot length of steel pipe he had ripped from a destroyed construction barrier. It was heavy, solid, and comforting in his grip. He rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. A 3-pointer, a massive, treads-based robot with missile launchers, was bearing down on a student. It was the sparkling boy Aoyama. He was on his knees, clutching his stomach, looking pale. Current status, trace movies, Aoyama whispered. The robot raised a launcher. Izuku didn't think. Calculate trajectory. Distance, 10 meters. Weapon weight, 4 kilos. Izuku spun. He used the rotation of his hips, the technique Eraserhead had drilled into him, and hurled the pipe like a javelin. It didn't pierce the armor. It wasn't meant to. The pipe clanged violently against the missile launcher barrel just as the robot fired. Boom! The missile detonated inside the barrel. The explosion blew the robot's arm off and staggered it backward. Smoke billowed. Izuku sprinted past the stunned Aoyama. Move! Izuku shouted. He leaped through the smoke. The robot was damaged, but still active. It swung its remaining arm. Izuku slid under the swing. He grabbed the dangling wires of the severed arm and pulled with everything he had. Shut down! He put his boot against the chassis and heaved. The wiring harness ripped free. The robot powered down, slumping forward. Izuku collapsed against the concrete, gasping. 31 points. Merci! Aoyama called out, shakily getting to his feet. Izuku nodded, wiping blood from his cheek. Check your naval laser usage. You're overheating. He picked up his pipe, now bent and scorched, and ran. 2 minutes remaining. The exhaustion was setting in. Izuku's arms felt like lead. His legs were screaming. Every impact vibrated through his bones. He had 38 points. It was a respectable score, but was it a hero's score? He was in the main plaza now. The fighting was intense. Debris littered the streets. Other students were slowing down too, their quirks reaching their limits. Then, the ground shook. It started as a vibration in the soles of his boots. Then, The windows of the surrounding buildings shattered. Boom, boom, a shadow swallowed the street. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. The zero-pointer. It was bigger than he had imagined. It was a skyscraper on treads. Its green chassis blotted out the sun. It punched a building, and the building crumbled like wet cardboard. Dust billowed out, a choking gray cloud. Threat level, extreme, the robot announced. Its voice was deep enough to rattle teeth. Panic. Run. It's the gimmick. Get out of here. The students broke. The formation dissolved into a terrified stampede running away from the Titan. Izuku turned to run. It was the logical choice. The robot was worth 0 points. Fighting it was a waste of resources and a risk to life. Run. Regroup. Find a stray one-pointer. He took a step away. Ow! The cry was faint, buried under the roar of collapsing masonry. Izuku stopped. His body froze. Not with fear, but with recognition. He looked back. Through the dust, he saw her. The girl with the round face. Ochako. She was pinned. A massive slab of concrete had fallen on her leg. She was struggling, her face twisted in pain, trying to levitate the debris, but she was exhausted. The zero-pointer was advancing. Its massive treads were crushing everything in its path. It was 50 meters away. 40. Izuku looked at the fleeing students. No one else had stopped. He looked at the robot. It was a god of destruction. He looked at the pipe in his hand. It was a piece of scrap metal. Can I be a hero without a quirk? The question wasn't philosophical anymore. It was tactical. Can I save her? Logic. I cannot lift the concrete. I cannot stop the robot with force. If I run, she dies, or gets critically injured before the pros step in. Logic. The robot is a tank. Tanks move via treads. Treads are a system of interlocking plates driven by gears. If the gear jams, the tread snaps. If the tread snaps, the mobility kill is achieved. Izuku turned around. He didn't scream smash. He didn't glow. He engaged the mechanism of his boots. The steel toes dug into the asphalt. He ran toward the Titan. Hey! A student screamed. What are you doing? You'll die. Izuku didn't hear them. His world had narrowed to a single point, the drive sprocket of the zero-pointer's right tread. The robot loomed over him. The wind from its movement nearly blew him over. He reached the base of the robot. It was like standing at the foot of a moving mountain. The noise was deafening, grinding gears, screeching metal. The tread was moving fast, a conveyor belt of death. Izuku sprinted alongside it. He needed speed. He needed timing. There. The gap between the drive wheel and the track plates. Eat this. Izuku swung the steel pipe with both hands, putting every ounce of his rotational torque into the throw. He didn't aim for the armor. He threw the pipe directly into the gap of the cog. Clang. The pipe lodged. For a millisecond, nothing happened. Then, physics took over. The massive gear tried to turn. The pipe refused to compress. Screech. The sound was ear-splitting. Sparks the size of fireworks erupted from the tread mechanism. The pipe bent, twisted, and then acted as a wedge. Snap. The massive link pin of the tread sheared off under the pressure. The track broke. The sudden loss of tension on the right side caused the robot to lurch violently. The tread unspooled like a dead snake, whipping around and smashing into the buildings. The zero-pointer listed to the right, its momentum carrying it into a skid. It crashed into the side of a building, grinding to a halt, unable to advance. It wasn't destroyed. But it was immobilized. Izuku didn't wait to watch it fall. He was already sprinting toward Ochako. He reached her. Hey! Can you hear me? Ochako looked up teary-eyed. My leg. The robot was groaning, systems failing, but debris was still falling. Izuku looked at the slab. It was too heavy for him to lift. He looked around. A long iron bar, reinforcement from the road, was sticking out of the ground nearby. Leverage. He grabbed the bar. He jammed it under the slab. He found a rock for a fulcrum. On 3, he gritted out, positioning himself on the end of the bar. I'm going to lift. You pull your leg. 1, 2, 3. He jumped on the bar. His veins bulged. His boots scraped sparks on the pavement. The slab lifted 4 inches. Go! Ochako scrambled backward, pulling her leg free with a cry of pain. Izuku let the bar go. The slab crashed back down. He fell to his knees, checking her. Is it broken? I think so, she gasped. Or twisted bad. Time's up. The siren wailed across the city. The robots instantly powered down. The zero-pointer slumped against the building, its red eye fading to black. Silence returned to the plaza. Izuku sat on the pavement, his chest heaving like a bellows. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't make a fist. His knuckles were raw and bleeding inside his gloves. He looked at the zero-pointer. He had stopped it. With a pipe. Then, the reality hit him. He had spent the last 2 minutes fighting a 0-point enemy. 38 points. He looked at the other students gathering around. He heard them comparing scores. I got 52. I got 45. Izuku lowered his head. 38 points. It was on the bubble. It might not be enough. You. He looked up. Ochako was looking at him. Her face was smudged with dirt, but her eyes were wide with awe. You stopped it, she whispered. You don't even have a quirk, and you stopped it. Izuku managed a weak, tired smile. It was just a tread jam, he croaked. Simple mechanics. Nice job, listener. Recovery Girl was walking through the crowd, handing out gummies. She reached them. Oh my, that looks nasty, she said, looking at Ochako's leg. Then she looked at Izuku. She saw the blood on his cheek, the bruises forming on his arms, the sheer exhaustion radiating off him. And you, she said softly. No broken bones? That's a rarity for the reckless ones. Just tired, Izuku mumbled. She kissed his forehead. A wave of lethargy hit him. Rest now, she commanded. Izuku closed his eyes. The darkness took him, and in the darkness, he replayed the fight, searching for the mistakes. The conference room. The scores are tabulated, Midnight said, placing a stack of papers on the table. The hologram in the center of the room displayed the leaderboard. 1. Bakugo Katsuki 77 villain points/0 rescue points. 2. Kirishima Aijiro 39 villain points/35 rescue points. And then there's the outlier, Vlad King grunted, tapping a name near the bottom of the villain point list. Midoriya Izuku 38 villain points. He's quirkless, Vlad said. 38 points is impressive for a civilian, but against pro standards? He barely scrapes the combat threshold. He lacks firepower. If he encounters a villain he can't trick, he's dead. He didn't just trick them, Snipe argued, rewinding footage of Izuku dismantling the one-pointer. Look at that precision. He strikes vital components. He knows anatomy. He knows mechanics. That's not luck, that's knowledge. He's fragile, Cementos added. One hit from a real villain and he's out. Can we in good conscience let a quirkless boy into the hero course? The room fell silent. It was the elephant in the room. The liability. Rewind the zero-pointer footage, Nisa squeaked. The hologram shifted. It showed the massive robot. It showed the fleeing crowd. It showed a single gray blur running toward the danger. Every other student ran, Nisa said. Even the ones with powerful combat quirks. They saw an insurmountable obstacle and retreated. Logical. Safe. The video showed Izuku jamming the tread. It showed him leveraging the concrete. This boy, Nisa continued, his tail twitching, saw a problem. He analyzed it. And he solved it. He didn't try to overpower the obstacle. He dismantled it. He saved the girl, Midnight said softly. That counts for something. It counts for everything. All Might's voice boomed from the doorway. The skinny form of Tashinori Yagi stood there, leaning against the frame. He looked at the screen, at the boy he had left on a rooftop 10 months ago. The boy who had cleaned the beach he drove past every morning. Rescue points, All Might said, are given for selflessness. For acting when others freeze. He pointed at the screen. He stopped the zero-pointer. He saved the examinee. And he did it without a drop of special power. Nisa smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. The hero course is not just about power, the principal said. It is about potential. And frankly, a student who can take down a zero-pointer with a scrap pipe? Nisa stamped a paw on the paper. That is illogical to ignore. 1 week later, the letter was heavy. Izuku sat at his desk. The same desk where he had destroyed his dreams 10 months ago. He stared at the envelope. Yue High School. His hands were shaking. Not from exertion but from fear. He had counted 38 points. It was low. Most years, the cutoff was around 40. Just open it, he whispered. He tore the seal. A metal disc fell out. A hologram projected onto the wall. It wasn't All Might. It was a man in black, with tired eyes and a scarf. Midoriya. Izuku froze. Erase her head. I told you not to die, the hologram said. Aizawa looked bored, holding a sheet of paper. You didn't die. You broke a robot's ankle, which was creative. Aizawa looked at the camera. You scored 38 villain points. By combat standards alone, you were on the wait list. Izuku's heart sank. However, Aizawa continued, the entrance exam is not just about destroying things. That would be irrational. Heroes save people. The video cut away. It showed Ochako Uraraka in the interview room. He saved me. She was pleading with President Mike. Please, can I give him my points? He tackled the giant robot. He didn't have a quirk, but he jumped in anyway. Izuku felt tears prick his eyes. He hadn't realized anyone had noticed. The video cut back to Aizawa. You can't give points away, Aizawa stated. But you don't need them. The score counter appeared on the screen. Midoriya Izuku. Villain points, 38. Rescue points, 60. Total, 98. Izuku stopped breathing. 60 points for taking down a zero-pointer to save an ally, Aizawa said. It was a reckless, dangerous, and completely insane maneuver. Aizawa smirked. A tiny, terrifying smirk. It was exactly what we look for. Aizawa extended a hand toward the camera. Welcome to your Hero Academia, Midoriya. Pack your bags. Class 1A is going to be hell. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence. He looked at his hands. The scarred, calloused hands that had moved trash, punched sand, and jammed gears. He didn't cry. Not this time. He clenched his fist. It was solid. Hell, Izuku whispered, a fierce grin spreading across his face. I've been living in hell for 10 months. I'm ready.